Hi there, thank you for joining me. My name is Luke Bradley. I'm the Seller Engagement Manager for eBay Canada. I'm here to speak with sellers from coast to coast to coast about using eBay as a platform for international selling. You can also join us at the digital booth for eBay Canada sellers that will be running throughout eBay Open, or you can hear me on Friday, where I'll be speaking to Canadian trading cards and collectible sellers as well. But today we're going to focus on eBay as a platform for Canadian sellers to stay local but sell global. Specifically, I want to bring in some insights about building your international strategy, what marketplaces to consider, how to approach different marketplaces and how that might affect things like your business policies, your return policies. We're going to talk about optimizing your listings for a global audience, using the eBay listing tool to make sure that sellers from the UK to Australia to China to the United States find your listings as appealing as possible. We're going to talk about best practices for shipping globally, some tips to expedite that process, make it as simple as possible, and we'll go over some of the FAQs, the frequently asked questions that I hear all the time from sellers that I'm working with when they're just considering beginning to export or they're just getting started on eBay. So why are we talking about exporting today? Well, specifically, it's because 99% of small businesses on eBay Canada export. Canada is a fairly large market. It's certainly a large market on eBay, but eBay offers access to over 138 million buyers around the world. So we want to make sure that we're accessing those buyers in global markets and specifically right across the border in the United States. So 99% export, and 57% of those who export to 10 or more marketplaces. That's of the 190 markets that we have worldwide. So exporting specifically for Canadian businesses is always an important part of that strategy. Exporting to the United States is a particularly important part of that strategy. So we want to make sure we're going through best practices, making it as easy as possible for our sellers to access buyers around the world. So when we go over exporting today and going global, I'm going to break it down into three main steps. So first is your strategy, finding the right markets for your products, how to consider those markets. Next would be listing, and finally, shipping. So let's start by talking about your international strategy. Before you begin, you're going to want to select your markets. I know a lot of sellers are a bit intimidated when I say there are 190 markets to choose from on eBay. Of course, you don't have to dive right in with 190 markets. In fact, we would probably recommend getting used to just a few at first. So you don't need to sell all at once. You can start by selecting the markets that are easiest for you and represent the biggest opportunity for growth. You can adjust your business policies to reflect the different needs of each market, and then you can experiment from there with different product offerings based on the market or different business policies based on that market. So generally, when we're speaking with sellers who are just joining the eBay platform, we like to break down the international marketplaces available to sellers into 4 categories. So I'm going to quickly go over those. First, of course, is the domestic region, so just Canada. So everywhere in Canada is served by Canada Post. Free shipping is probably this is the area where free shipping is the most realistic and the most practical. Of course, you can set rate tables if you're concerned about shipping potentially to more rural areas. So if you want to make sure that you're offering free shipping within those urban zones, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, the GTA, Montreal, but those more rural, remote areas where shipping is more expensive, you can use rate tables to reflect that. But the vast majority of buyers are going to be in those urban zones. So this is where it's probably easiest to use free shipping. After Canada, of course, we have the United States. Over roughly 50% of eBay Canada sales in most categories are to the United States. So this is our primary export market, not just on eBay, but of course in almost every facet of the economy. It's particularly well suited to free shipping. Of course, if you're in Toronto, you're closer to Buffalo than you are Vancouver. And there are third-party shipping services offered across Canada that allow you to expedite your access to the United States. So when we're looking at just getting started on eBay or just getting started shipping globally, the two marketplaces that we want to make sure we're including no matter what are the United States and Canada. That alone is going to represent the majority of your prospective customers, and of course, those are the two easiest to ship to. Once you feel comfortable with the United States, you've gotten used to the different idiosyncrasies of selling globally, you might want to consider those next group of markets, which is our easy to reach markets. Those are markets like the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, or the European Union writ large. These markets have established postal services that integrate well with Canada Post, so you can still use Canada Post quite easily. And of course, they still include 3 of eBay Canada's top 5 export destinations in Germany, Australia, and the UK. So these are still significant markets. They're easier to access because of their more established postal services, and they represent a fairly significant amount of buyers or prospective buyers for your items. Finally, once you're feeling very experienced, very confident, and you want to really expand that global reach, is when you should start considering the developing markets like China, Africa, or Latin America. Now, this is a minority of sales, but it does represent rapid growth on the platform and a lot of opportunities for sellers. One barrier or hurdle to getting set up on these markets is probably going to be that you might depend more on private carriers to access them. That might reflect your shipping costs. So that's one of the challenges. But once you're able to overcome that, you can find that with certain product categories, there's actually a lot of interest from buyers in these areas. Of course, when you're setting up your business policies, you can design them so that buyers outside of those markets that you ship to automatically can reach out to you and ask if you're comfortable selling to them. So those are the 4 ways that we would encourage you to think about your international strategy. We would absolutely encourage as a foundation, Canada and the United States. Let's talk a little bit about your product offerings as well. Consider the product that you're offering and whether it lends itself well to international sales. Is it a highly seasonal product? I work with sellers in Nova Scotia, for instance, who sell sailing products. Now that is a highly seasonal product that might lend itself very well to sailors in the off-season in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, who might be in the West Indies, for example. So that's probably an example where you would want to include those within your strategy. If you're selling fashion, consider the Southern Hemisphere as an opportunity to sell winter goods out of the normal season within Canada. Now, are they easy to access in those marketplaces is going to be relevant as well. You want to make sure that this is maybe something that would be unique for buyers in those areas. And then, of course, you want to consider the laws and regulations that govern their sale in different markets. Different marketplaces will have different rules according to what you can sell or export into that country, and we encourage you to research those rules before you include that market. Now, we've talked about your international strategy. You're feeling comfortable about what markets you want to access and which product offerings you want to make sure that you're highlighting in each market. Let's talk a bit about optimizing your listings for a global audience. Now, the fundamentals of listing are still going to apply whether that listing is being seen by an American, a Canadian, a Brit, a German, or an Australian. But there are some additional details or strategies that you might want to employ to build trust, to build confidence in that listing globally, and pique buyer interest in international markets. So let's just go over the fundamentals of listing first. Of course, you want to take great photos. You have up to 24 photos that you can add. Used to be 12, but more recently we've announced you can add 24. Now, you want to make sure you're including at least 3 from multiple angles to give some confidence in that you're highlighting any unique features or potentially highlighting flaws in that item. You want to create an effective title that includes brand, color, and size first. In the first 40 characters, avoid using unusual keyboard characters or relying on superlatives or caps lock to draw attention to your item. You want to write an accurate description. You want to make sure you're including as many relevant item specifics as possible. Of course, you want to offer returns. The industry standard for returns is 30 days with the buyer paying return shipping. Of course, if you want to stand out, you can offer 30 days with the seller paying for return shipping. But offering some sort of return policy, of course, is important when it comes to building trust. And then you want to offer multiple shipping options. So have your standard Canada Post service available, but maybe for a small fee. If a seller wants an expedited parcel, an expedited service, you can offer that as well. Now, those are the fundamentals of listing, no matter where your listing is being seen. But there are some additional things you might want to consider when you're listing for that global audience. First, you do want to take great photos, but consider taking videos as well, particularly as you're entering marketplaces where language barriers might exist in the description. It's important to offer as much visual content as possible for that item. So maybe go beyond 3 photos, maybe go beyond photos at all and use a video. You want to create an effective title, and you want to avoid using regional language. Some sellers here might be from Saskatchewan. You might call a hooded sweatshirt a bunny hug. Now that's adorable, but it's probably not what you would want to refer a hooded sweatshirt as when you're listing for a global audience outside of Saskatchewan. So avoid using that highly regional language. Try to make sure that you're using the terminology that's more globally accepted. Of course, you want to write an accurate description, and if it's particularly important to you, consider a translation service for your description templates. You definitely want to include item specifics, as I've mentioned, but you also want to include things like international sizing or compatibility for electronics. So if we're selling sneakers, making sure that we include the UK and EU size is also going to be important, not least because domestic buyers sometimes like to use that sizing as well. So make sure you're using those important aspects and specifics of an item. Now, you still want to offer returns whenever available, but you can reflect the differences based on the market. So I've mentioned if you want to go above and beyond in offering returns, you can pay for shipping up to 30 days rather than the buyer paying for return shipping. That might not be realistic in every market. So make sure that you're reflecting the different nuances of each market that you sell to when you're offering those returns. So maybe you offer buyer or seller paid return shipping within Canada, within the United States, but if we're talking about buyers in Sweden, it may not be realistic to pay for that return shipping. And of course, you still want to offer multiple shipping options, and you particularly want to do that to the United States. Making sure that we are using expedited options when available, giving people that extra flexibility can go a really long way in growing your sales and increasing your conversion. So we've gone over your listing strategy. We've gone over best practices to optimize your listings for a global audience. I'm going to quickly go over shipping globally because I know that this is a big challenge for a lot of new sellers who are maybe just dipping their toes into e-commerce. Frankly, it's a big challenge for a lot of some of our most experienced sellers. Shipping is always a big hurdle to overcome, especially when you're talking about international markets. Reliable shipping, of course, is going to be the key. Supply chains in the past few years have become strained, and it's more important than ever to offer those dependable shipping services and make sure that you're abiding by your commitments when it comes to shipping. Buyers are really looking for as much certainty as possible in their shipping, which is an advantage to sellers in North America, where there's a little more confidence in the shipping services among North American buyers. So make sure that you're abiding by best practices, that you're keeping your handling time down, and using some of the tips that we're about to share. And of course, adjust your pricing and adjust the services that you offer based on the marketplace. The shipping services and prices that you offer to the United States should probably be different than shipping prices to Germany because it's going to cost a different amount to ship to those two markets. So just a few of the best practices to go over. You want to make sure that you're using tracking whenever possible. That improves the customer experience, allows them to get a sense of where their item is, when they can expect it, but it's also important when it comes to protecting yourself. So making sure that you're uploading your tracking number as much as possible. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do that shortly. You want to make sure you're abiding by regulations for goods entering each market. Make sure the products can be sold in that marketplace, for instance, and understand the customs obligations that you have when you're selling. And then you want to offer some more flexibility. You want to build that flexibility, that freedom into your shipping and return policies for your buyers. That is more important than ever. So I mentioned the importance of using and uploading your tracking when it comes to tracked services. This is a way of building certainty with your customers and of protecting yourself in the event that there is any sort of conflict. And you can do that by ensuring you upload your tracking. If you print through eBay Labels, the first-party label printing service, you can print Canada Post or FedEx labels right now. Tracking is going to be uploaded automatically. You don't have to worry about doing it yourself. There will be times, if you're not using eBay Labels, where you might want to manually upload the tracking number for the sold item, maybe from the eBay app or from the desktop. Now, those are long numbers, and we want to make sure that you're double checking or triple checking your tracking number if you choose to enter it manually. I cannot tell you how many times we've heard of sellers who went out of their way to buy a tracked service only to find that they entered the wrong number when they uploaded it to their eBay item. Of course, you can fix that afterwards, provided you still have the number, but important to double check, triple check so that you don't run into those issues. And then finally, for higher value items, it's probably worth considering purchasing insurance as well. So you want to make sure at the very minimum you're purchasing tracking whenever it's practical. You want to make sure that you're uploading that tracking so that your customers can see where that item is in its journey to their door. And you want to make sure that you're double checking, triple checking, maybe even quadruple checking the tracking number if you enter it manually. Next, as I mentioned, you want to abide by regulations. You want to make sure that the product you're selling is legal and compliant. There is a great resource called the FedEx Global Prohibited and Restricted Items List that can help you a lot in understanding which items are restricted in which markets and how you can respond. Of course, international buyers are generally going to be responsible for the payment of local duties. Your obligation is in entering accurate customs information. I know sometimes it can be tempting to save your buyer any potential customs fees by listing an item as a gift. That is customs fraud, and it is of course against eBay's policies, so I cannot suggest strongly enough avoiding doing that. Make sure you're being as transparent as possible when you're entering that customs information. Like your tracking information, when you upload that info on eBay Labels, it's a little easier, a little smoother for you to enter the precise value of the item as it's being shipped out. Now I want to talk a minute about the de minimis threshold for the United States. That is the minimum before customs duties are going to apply, before those local duties are going to be paid by the buyer. In the United States, the de minimis threshold for goods incoming from Canada is generally $800 US. So something to bear in mind when you're considering how you might be pricing your items or which items you want to make available in the US. Finally, you want to offer flexibility and freedom. I've mentioned this a few times now for your buyers. Build that into your shipping and return policies. Make sure that you are offering more than one carrier or service for your shipping, especially to Canada and the United States. Make sure that you are reflecting the different costs in your fee structure. Maybe you would use free shipping within Canada for a standard parcel, but a flat rate of $4, $5 for an expedited service. you can use multiple shipping options and apply those to your listings. The industry standard for returns, as I mentioned before, is 30 days with the buyer paying return shipping. But if you're new, if you're trying to build that trust, maybe attract some new customers as you're just getting started in e-commerce or on eBay, you can go above and beyond, particularly for US and Canadian buyers, by paying for return shipping. Again, that is above and beyond. That is not considered the industry standard, but it is a great way to build trust and provide some more confidence to your buyers. Finally, you want to keep your handling time low as possible, as much as possible. The industry standard for handling time is typically about 2 business days. So if you sell on a Thursday, shipping it out by Monday, ideally. But if you really want to stand out, trying to offer same-day shipping and handling is excellent. Keeping it to 1 business day is also a great way to build that buyer confidence in the fact that they're going to get their item as quickly as possible. So those are just some of the ways that you can provide a better shipping experience for your customers globally. There are other ways you can explore. I would recommend going to the Seller Center, to eBay Help, to learn about some of the benefits of things like eBay labels or other services that you can access from within your city that might allow you to offer cheaper shipping, faster shipping, or more shipping options specifically to buyers in the United States. Now, as I mentioned, 99% of small businesses operating on eBay Canada export. This is a very important part of the reason they're on eBay. So we hear a lot of questions related to exporting. So I wanted to go over just a few of those most frequently asked questions, talk about them a little bit and give you some idea. Of course, if you have additional questions, we would encourage you to visit the virtual booth that eBay Canada is running. I will be there, some of my colleagues will be there, but most importantly, other sellers will also be there. Really encourage you to visit something like Community or this booth and speak with other sellers, see what they're doing as well to make their global shipping, their global selling even better. Now, one of the more common questions is which markets should we choose when we're thinking about what markets to offer shipping to. Of course, the most important market is the United States. That should be foundational, provided that you are selling something that can be sold in the United States. You want to make sure that you're selling to that. It is the world's largest economy. It's right at our doorstep. Sellers in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, I'm sure envy our position. So out of respect to them, we should make sure we're selling to the US. Making sure that you are exploring the United Kingdom, the European Union, Australia, and New Zealand, those easier to reach countries, also a great option. Japan, also an excellent option. And then once you feel comfortable with your shipping, with selling globally, that's where you want to explore those developing markets. And again, I can't emphasize strongly enough, even when you do not select those markets to ship to, you can enable buyers to reach out to you proactively and ask if you're comfortable in that situation to sell to them. And I would encourage you to do that. We also hear a lot of questions, especially for new sellers who aren't used to selling globally, about their obligations for customs. What about different value-added taxes? What about sales tax? And generally, as I mentioned, customs and duties are going to be paid for by the international buyer, but you want to make sure that you are being as accurate as possible with your listing in its location and with the customs information as you enter it, as you ship, to ensure that you are abiding by eBay policy and abiding by any local laws and regulation. Things like value-added tax or sales tax can change depending on the market, so we encourage you to research each market before you add it to understand what your obligations might be in terms of regulatory compliance, tax, or other fees or legal hurdles that you want to make sure you're abiding by. In the United Kingdom and Australia, they do have value-added tax, for example. In those two markets, eBay will collect and remit the value-added tax on your behalf. The buyer will see the item with the value-added tax already added. Finally, we have how can I simplify my international shipping? I know how complex shipping can be. Even shipping within Canada can be a bit of a hassle at times, so we always hear about people who want to make it as easy as possible and hopefully as inexpensive as possible. If you're looking for the absolute most convenient option as a seller who's just getting started, that's where I would recommend eBay labels very strongly. It's the simplest way to ship. You can purchase, print, upload your tracking information, upload any customs information, all on eBay. So in the event that you want the most convenient option, that's where I would recommend going to, eBay labels. If you are looking for, once your business has grown a little bit, once you have a steady stream of sales, particularly to the United States, I would really encourage you to look at third-party shipping services that amalgamate shipping options and allow you to access different bundled rates. It's a very common thing we hear about our sellers. I would encourage you to visit the eBay community and talk to other sellers about how they're approaching it. I can't recommend strongly enough leveraging the collective experience. eBay's seller community is so rich and they're so rich in knowledge and so willing to share that information. It's a really important resource that if you are newer or if you're more experienced, you would be remiss not to avail yourself of. And then finally, we have ways to reduce international shipping costs. And I already mentioned this in the last question as well. You might want to consider exploring third-party shipping services. They're available in most major Canadian cities and some of the smaller cities as well. So take a look there, speak with other sellers about the different third parties that they may be using. And in the meantime, we're going to keep working hard with our carrier partners to provide the best possible shipping options on eBay labels for our sellers. So some of the key takeaways from the last 25-30 minutes together. When you're thinking about shipping globally, you want to make sure you're adjusting your business policies by market. You want to make sure that the different shipping needs, return policies are all being reflected in your business policies and that you're changing it according to the idiosyncrasies of each market. You want to make sure you are at the very least shipping to the United States. That is foundational. That is roughly 50% of all eBay Canada sales. So you want to make sure you're accessing that market. You want to make sure you're listing for a global audience, thinking of what a global buyer, someone outside of Canada, would be considering when they look at your listing. Make sure that you're listing for that audience, avoiding regional language, adding more photos, including item specifics like international sizing or compatibility for electronics. Finally, you want to abide by local regulations in each market. I've gone over a bit of customs information, but as you're adding different marketplaces, important to understand what your requirements are as a exporter, as somebody bringing goods into their borders, and understand how you can make sure that you're abiding by those. So those are just some of the best ways to make sure that you are optimizing your listing, your shipping, and your strategy for a global audience. We want to encourage you to join us at the virtual booth over the next few days. We will have eBay staff, but again, more importantly, eBay sellers available to speak with you, answer questions. We'd also just like to get to know you, so make sure that you're coming out and saying hello at the virtual booth. If you are a seller in trading cards or collectibles, I will also be seeing you on Friday, where we will be talking about that specific product vertical for Canadian sellers. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon.